You're listening to the Big House Bleachers Podcast.
Welcome to episode 7 of the Big House Bleachers Podcast. I'm Michael Smeltzer. I'm here with my good friend Matt Hartwell, as always. Matt, what's up, man?
I'm doing great, Mike. 10-0 for the first time since 2006. The first time since I personally was 16 years old. So it's just been an incredible ride. I know a lot of people have a lot to say about Michigan's style of play during it, but just fine to be sitting here at 10-0, buddy.
Yeah, and I think so. 2006, the last time we were 10-0, that has to be the number 1 versus number 2 Michigan-Ohio State game where Michigan went on the road, lost by 3 in Columbus, and back then there was no playoff, so we were on the outside looking in, sitting at number 3 as Florida, Urban Meyer at Florida of all people, took on Ohio State in the national championship game. So this might be one of those full circle moments where, okay, we're back at 10-0. We might have a number 1 versus number 2 Ohio State. I mean, probably with Georgia's positioning, it'll probably be number 2 versus number 3 is what it's looking like. But yeah, man, 10-0. Michigan beats Nebraska 34-3. The scoreboard looks very dominant, and the game was very dominant, but Michigan has an identity, don't we? I mean, it's kind of crazy. Like when you watch a Michigan game, if I'm being honest, it's not the most exciting style of football out there. You know, the way that football is played nowadays, there are a lot of more exciting games on during the Michigan game. But as a Michigan fan who's seen Denard Robinson and Rich Rodriguez and really exciting teams go 5-7, I think I would prefer a 10-0, somewhat boring win. Wouldn't you agree?
Absolutely. I'll take Blake Corum rushing for over 130 yards consistently, day in and day out, all day.
Yeah, and so let's talk about the game a little bit. Let's get some kind of initial reactions and recap. We're not going to do the in-depth positional breakdown that we've been doing to make some room for some other things on the show today. But what is your initial reaction of the game and maybe some players that stuck out to you? And keep in mind, we're going to do game balls here in a second to wrap up the game recap. So don't give away any of your game balls. We'll get to that.
Absolutely, Mike. First initial reaction for me when I look at the stat sheet is just a complete game on both sides of the ball. And that's something that Michigan struggled with up to this point, regardless if we're playing a mediocre team or an incredibly great team. You know, Michigan just has a style of play of tiring out its opponent. That's no testament to how good or bad Michigan is. They're playing the first half, but they just have lately had a different identity, and last night or yesterday, if you will, they took care of business in both halves in a dominant style. Defensive side of the ball was obviously the story of the game, both allowing under 75 yards passing and rushing. So just an incredible effort from the defense, I thought.
Yeah, defensively and offensively, a really dominant performance. We would have been in trouble, honestly, if this game was close, because this is a Nebraska team that's not good. We knocked out their backup quarterback that started the game, so we're up against their third-string quarterback. And then on top of that, we knocked out their offensive coordinator, right? Like, that doesn't typically happen. And I'm not making light. Honestly, I felt terrible for that guy. Like, he was an older gentleman. I don't know his name, but their offensive coordinator went down on the sideline as well. So not only are they on their third string quarterback, I think in the second half, I don't think their offensive coordinator was even on the field. So yeah, if they would have been moving the ball on us and scoring on us, we probably would have been in trouble. So we did exactly what we should have done. We took care of business. we might. I haven't looked at the numbers yet, but our defensive points per game, we might be number one in the country, because coming into this week, it was Georgia and Illinois, and we were third. Georgia gave up 19, so I don't think that's gonna, or maybe they gave up more than that. I got to check the final score. Georgia's is going to go up. Illinois is probably out of there because they gave up a bunch of points. So we might be sitting on the number one defense in the country right now.
Yeah, just incredibly impressive. I didn't even realize how dominant it was until I looked at the final box score at the end of the game. But it's crazy how defense works like that, right? You never notice if it's good or bad until the very end, and then you're kind of like, holy shit, we held them to 75 yards. Like, that's on both sides of the ball. That's crazy, So just a couple bright spots on offense that I do have to mention. Game ball, not non-receivers, but still excellent participants in this game. Colston Loveland, in the absence of Luke Schoonmaker, was just incredible, right from the very get. He reeled in about as many catches and yards as Scooney would normally get in a game. So that was awesome to see, including that great effort to not go down. His ass cheek, unfortunately, just barely grazed the grass. But I mean, that dude really wanted those extra yardage, and he certainly earned it. And then also Andrell Anthony finally getting in the end zone in a fucking incredibly weird fashion, if you will. But I mean, I'll take it. I know Andrell will take it. Awesome job, Andrell. We see you.
Yeah, as RG3 would say about that Colston Loveland play, his booty cheeks hit the ground.
His McThickums.
Yeah. And then yeah, and we've been all waiting on Andrell Anthony to get in the end zone, and who would have thought it would be on a nice long Ronnie Bell reception that gets fumbled on the 1-inch line and then probably hit the out of bounds back line. Yeah, I mean, it was really close, maybe went out, but there was no camera angle to see it. Excellent effort by Andrell. So for a guy that has not been getting the touches that he wants, to stay engaged in the game and to make a play like that shows a lot about his character. So that was really good to see. A couple of call outs, just kind of more obvious call outs. JJ McCarthy, not a great completion percentage performance, but and he missed some guys down the field, but they also dropped some balls. I have a feeling we'll talk about that in some of our later segments a little bit. But two passing touchdowns technically, because that Andrell recovery actually counts as a passing touchdown. I had to check the box score to even understand if that's what that was or not. And then he got a rushing TD as well. So 3 touchdowns for JJ, and then Corum did what Corum does. He went for 162 yards and a touchdown. So overall, we saw a lot of the same. Really from Michigan, it was not a whole lot different other than Colston Loveland getting in the game, and then CJ Stokes got more yardage than we've seen him get. So all the way around, dominant performance, a good performance. It's a they are who we thought they were kind of performance for Michigan, and I'll take it. We're 10-0. All right, man. On the defensive side of the ball, just a quick call out for me. Junior Colson was, his usual self with strong tackling. Mason Graham's a beast, right? I don't think there's any argument there. And then the guys that stuck out to me that just have their swagger right now, they on the defensive side of the ball, it just feels like they're doing what they want to do is Mike Sanderstill and Will Johnson. Actually, those guys are killing it.
Yeah, absolutely. Will Johnson just always making a name for himself in every game with some type of big play or moment that gets the crowd going. No, didn't show up really on the stat sheet in any tackling categories, but normally that's what you want out of your good DBs. And I think a strong case can be made to start that young guy right now. But I mean, obviously, you've got a lot of experience in the backfield, and you don't want to just ignorantly rush into that type of decision without giving him the chance to develop. But it's been great to see Will Johnson out there doing his thing as a 5-star athlete.
Yeah, and I mean, Jamon was back and played well. DJ got burned again, man, in the first half. I don't know. Did you notice that? That first like long pass that Nebraska had, that was DJ Turner. He got shook again. So I love DJ, but man, like we're seeing an awful lot of that. So I'm not sure what that's about.
Absolutely, and that's certainly not the type of deep threat that you can allow against an Ohio State team in a couple weeks that prides themselves on putting some space between themselves and their opponent early with that deep ball.
Right. Well, let's move on to our game balls segment. We're each going to hand out 3 game balls for the game, and it's totally fine if we give them to the same guy. You know, I'm sure that they would be happy to accept 2 game balls from us. We'll go one at a time. Let's pass it back and forth. I will let you do the honors of starting. Who is your first game ball for Michigan versus Nebraska?
And my first game ball, Mike, in typical boring Michigan fashion, I have to give it to Blake Corum. I mean, it being our first game ball ever, I know it's a boring pick, but Blake Corum, he was just amazing as always. He's how we won the game. You know, you look back at it at the game. Of course, there's the defensive effort. You can name a couple of defensive guys that certainly were valuable pieces to yesterday's effort. But Blake Corum is just a beast. They ask the world of him. They basically ask him to go out there and offensively win the game every week. And he does it. So my first game ball goes to him.
Yeah, and you know, he's getting closer and closer to guaranteeing an invite to New York for that Heisman ceremony. I don't think he's quite there yet, but if he puts up another, 150 plus a couple touchdowns against Illinois, the Ohio State game might not even matter. He might get an invite regardless of how he plays in that game. And then, of course, he can win the damn thing in Columbus. Depending on how he plays in that game, he could win the Heisman. So excellent game ball, even though it was blatantly obvious and boring. No argument from me there. So my first game ball is in the same category. I was thinking along the same lines of you. We watched this vanilla game. Michigan's pounding it up the middle, and I'm thinking, okay, Corum's an obvious answer. But then I started looking at the offensive line, and I was like, I'm gonna give a game ball to one of these guys. Like I gotta give you gotta give some love to the O line. And I was trying to pick like who was the guy that I was gonna give the ball to, and then I watched a play, and I think it was either a 3rd down or a 4th down. It might have been that 1 4th down we picked up, but Olu, he pulled to the right, opened up a gap, and just got us the first down like it was nothing. And I saw that, and I was like, you know what? We've been pounding it right up the middle all game. So Olu is going to get my first game ball.
Absolutely, and an excellent choice, obviously. You can honestly make a case for him almost as much as Blake Corum and anybody on that offensive line. So valuable to us every game, in and out. So excellent pick there. My second game ball is going to go to Junior Colson. He was all over the place. 6 total tackles, I believe it was. 4 of those being solo tackles. He also registered a sack early on again in this game, as well as a tackle for loss. So Junior Colson just all over the place everywhere. He's literally a linchpin of this defense. I don't know what we would do without him.
Yeah, I'm curious to see what the NFL thinks of Junior Colson, right? Just kind of as he slowly evolves at Michigan. I'm interested to see where he ends up on draft boards down the line. Excellent pick. No argument from me there.
Who you got?
My second game ball goes to Mason Graham. Mason Graham is an absolute beast on the D line. For a true freshman to come in and do the things that he's done. In this game, you can see how comfortable he's getting on the defensive side of the ball. He's getting into the backfield. He got a sack. He got another couple of really impressive tackles. And this really seemed to be a coming out party for Mason Graham. So he gets my second game ball for the game.
Absolutely. Excellent pick. If you didn't pick him as one of your game balls, I was going to honorable mention him just because he was such a beast last night. I mean, just a physical specimen, always aggressive in getting to the quarterback. He just kind of flattens guys whenever he's blazing through there. So excellent pick. My third game ball is going to go to Ronnie Bell, even though he dropped that pass on the 1 yard line. I mean, his ability to just run after the catch is just insane. The guy gets yards after he catches the balls from JJ. Obviously, Michigan doesn't do well in the deep pass, right? So we have to find other ways to come up with those chunk yardage plays. And if we didn't have Ronnie Bell, it would be impossible to do that because most of Ronnie Bell's catches or yardage comes after the catch. And there's very few guys on this team that can do that in the way that he does. So he still got a touchdown, almost got a second touchdown, teed Andrell up for a touchdown. So honestly, I know Michigan Nation was just so hungry for the Andrell touchdown. So you guys can thank Ronnie Bell for that too.
Well, and it was impressive watching the game when he slid. You know, the field is wet and he slid. And I thought, oh, he was out of bounds, right? Like I'm sitting there thinking when I watched that play live and it looks like he fumbles it out of the back of the end zone. I'm like, maybe we want that to be out of bounds. Like, I'm not really sure. And then they go back and show and like, again, Ronnie Bell comes up with an amazing play. And I'm thinking this guy could really be an NFL receiver, which is something we didn't think a few years ago, and he looks like, I mean, he makes spectacular plays every game, so I love that pick. And in a true anticlimactic fashion, my third game ball goes to Blake Corum. I mean, how can you not pick Blake Corum? How can you not give that guy a game ball? And so he gets the double game ball. You know, he gets the Big House Bleachers podcast stamp of approval. The dude's just amazing. He's our Heisman candidate. He's our guy. So he got my third.
He's our Hutch on offense this year.
That's right. And I'm going to give an honorable mention here.
I hope it's my same honorable mention because I was going to give one too. So I'm hoping you're giving the same one.
You go first, and then I'm going to go.
Right. All right, so I have to give a shout out to CJ Stokes. Just incredible effort from him. 8 carries for 68 yards. Donovan Edwards left the game, hopefully with just minor stuff, nothing major. Well, I'm sure we'll touch on that later. But CJ Stokes just carried the second half of that ball game while we were trying to give Blake some rest, you know, after he had already amassed 160 yards at halftime or whatever it was. And CJ came through, didn't fumble the ball, did an excellent job.
That actually is not the same as my honorable mention, but I love it, right? Because I even mentioned during the game, I was like, man, Donovan Edwards and CJ Stokes next year, or maybe Corum comes back. We don't really know what that looks like next year, but it looks like Michigan is retooling in a way they used to in the 90s when it was just like A-Train, Chris Perry, Mike Hart, you know, like we were just always retooling. So I love that pick. My honorable mention is based on one play, just one play. Mike Sanderstill, honorable mention game ball for not letting that dude hurdle him and going straight up and jacking him in the nuts. I always think to myself, I'm like, is hurdling a guy easy or something? Because we're starting to see this over and over and over again. And I always think, why don't they just like explode up and just take the dude out? And usually it's because a well-timed hurdle is when somebody is like vertically diving, you know? Well, this Nebraska dude did not get his physics right because Mike Sanders still had his center of gravity. This dude tried to hurdle him, and Sanders still, you know, went straight up and destroyed him where the sun don't shine. So to me, that's an honorable mention to Mikey S.
Excellent pick there. I mean, that was certainly the moment that was on loop on the timeline on Twitter last night, right? I mean,
Yeah.
just going up, Mike Sainristil still just launched that guy. And I mean, I don't know who it was that ended up getting the tackle after that, but I mean, kudos to that guy for not wrecking that guy's career completely, because he was in a very vulnerable position after the captain launched him like that.
Yeah. I mean, it's something that you don't see every day. That's for damn sure. All right, let's move on to what's the deal. Now, this gives us an opportunity to just ask, what's the deal? Like, what's going on? And this can be about Michigan. It can be about something else. It can be, like whatever you want it to be about. It's just an opportunity to ask the question, what's the deal? So again, I'll let you tee it off first. What do you have for this week?
So this week, I'll start it off with an obvious question that's on everybody's mind, and that's what's the deal with the deep ball, right? I mean, at this point, we can't tell, is it JJ that can't throw it? Is the wide receivers that can't catch it? I mean, what's collapsing here? Because we're just missing on these big yardage plays. And it's not even just to Andrell Anthony. It's to Cornelius Johnson. It's to guys that we were hitting in the beginning of the season. Granted, it was against cupcake competition, but I mean, we've just got to find a way to get it together just a little bit, enough to take some of the load off of Blake Corum's shoulders and even Ronnie Bell, to where we're not relying on chunk yardage plays to either come out of those two guys, Yeah,
and this is proof that we don't compare notes before the show, because I have almost the exact same thing. In my notes, it says Michigan receivers. Like, what is the deal? JJ has missed some guys too, right? Like JJ's got a cannon. He's a pretty accurate passer, but so JJ's not out of the equation here. There's clearly a chemistry issue between JJ and his receivers downfield. But, I watch some other top tier teams play, and I see guys going up, making spectacular grabs, getting to the ball, even when they're overthrown, underthrown. And man, we are not seeing that from Michigan's receivers. And it makes me nervous, because if I'm a 5-star wide receiver in high school right now, do I want to go to Michigan? And it makes me a little nervous. Now there's some athletes out there that are going to come to Michigan. It's always going to be an attractive place, but we don't want to become, a place where receivers can't get numbers. And now this is 2 years in a row where receivers have been having trouble getting to the ball. So for me, it's like, what's the deal, Michigan receivers? Hang on to the ball. Don't drop it. Go up. Make a play.
And I'm just going to throw it out there a little bit, Mike, because, I mean, Michigan, they've been throwing the ball around a little bit. You know what I mean? So it's really not even a testament. I know that there's a lot of blame being thrown around on the offense and the offensive play calling and all of that. And there is a lot of vanilla-ness to this offensive play calling. But I mean, the last few games, JJ threw, he's 17 passes yesterday, but before that against Rutgers, 27 passes, 25, 24. It's not like we're not throwing the ball ever. You know what I mean? So the opportunities are there. Yeah, I just think there's a lack of connection or a lack of emphasis and practice on these deep plays or something, because we got to be farther along than this if we get in a situation where we're down by like 10, 14 points. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and we would have thrown the ball 25 times yesterday too, but Matt Weiss and Sharon Moore did what any logical person would do when it wasn't working, and Blake Corum would get 9 yards every carry. They were like, well, hell, we got to win the game, right? So they just started handing it off to Blake Corum. It was like, you can hardly blame them for doing that. They clearly wanted to get the passing game going. That's why they're throwing it downfield. They really want to get the passing game going. But it's just not there, and nobody can stop the run right now. So, can we beat Ohio State with the run? it would be ridiculous to say no because we did it last year, right? Like we literally did it last year. But I think we saw in the Georgia game that, when you're going up against top tier talent, you got to be balanced and you got to be able to do pretty much everything, right? If you're talking about a national championship. So that is something that leaves, it leaves a little bit to be desired, but we're nitpicking at this point, right? Like I'm not complaining about Michigan. We're 10-0, we're great. But if we're going to nitpick anything, I think you and I both asked, what's the deal with the Michigan passing game? All right, let's move on to pump the brakes. There's our extremely high budget sound effects that we got for pump the brakes. And so this segment is a little bit self-explanatory. You and I are each going to bring a couple of takes to the other individual. And if the person disagrees, they're going to say pump the brakes, and you might just hear. Or if they agree with the take, we'll just keep driving. So I tell you what, I'll go ahead and lead this one off. For me, my first take here is, and I was thinking about this really hard. UCLA messed up my first. I had a really good take about UCLA, and then they lost to Arizona, and I was like, okay, I was wrong about that. So I've switched it up. I believe that Penn State should be the highest ranked 2-loss team in the nation.
You're just going to get a big fat keep driving from me on that one, buddy, because I've got a very similar mindset when it comes to something like that. I mean, their only 2 losses are to the top 2 and 3 teams in the country. They've dominated almost all of their other respective competition up to this point, so I don't really think you can make a case for ranking like an SEC 2-loss team over somebody like Penn State. Of course, that's not going to happen, but I mean, Penn State is just a very, very complete Big Ten team. Not as complete as Michigan or OSU, but they've done an excellent job. So I'm just going to keep right on driving with you there, buddy. I've got one for you. And
hang on. Just for our listeners, I'm sorry to interrupt, Matt. I have to defend that just a little bit in case there's anybody out there that is an SEC homer or a fan or something. So you have the SEC teams that are 2 losses right now, which is now Ole Miss, LSU, Alabama. And then really the only other teams with 2 losses you could look at are now in the Pac-12, right? You've got Oregon and Utah and UCLA. Now the Pac-12 ones, they kind of take care of themselves. We don't even really have to address that. But with these SEC teams, if you're looking at resume, you alluded to the fact that Penn State's 2 losses are to Michigan and Ohio State. They're both top 3 teams. And so if you look at the losses, Penn State absolutely has the best resume as far as 2-loss teams go. But then you have people saying, well, it's just the Big Ten, they're eating up on inferior opponents. Well, they just beat Maryland 30-0 yesterday, and Maryland had a winning record, a strong team. And if we go all the way back to earlier in the year, Penn State destroyed Auburn. And I'm not saying Auburn is like this amazing team this year. They're having a down year, but that's a mid-SEC team, and Penn State destroyed them. So you look at the whole resume, Penn State should absolutely be the highest ranked 2-loss team. All right, I'm sorry, buddy. I had to get that out because I've just been fuming inside of me when I watch these SEC folks talk. But all right, what you got for me?
No, and by all means, absolutely. I mean, defend that Big Ten, because there's a lot of people shitting on the Big Ten right now. I mean, you got to put some respect on the Big Ten's name. Historically, the Big Ten destroys these SEC and Pac-12, any other conference. You know what I mean? It's nothing even really personally against the SEC. The Big Ten just may possibly have a better conference this year, and that it'll be decided come later in the season. And I'm sure I might eat my words, but who knows?
Maybe. Yeah, the Big Ten looks a little weak this year, if I'm being honest. But it's always interesting to see when Illinois and Purdue go match up against, like LSU or whoever's going to be, like they do surprisingly well. in those games.
It always seems that way, exactly. And then come bowl season, these Big Ten teams that we always think weren't that good all year long end up pantsing all these other guys. You know what I mean? So it's very interesting to watch. It'll be interesting to see how it all shapes out, especially come bowl season. But I'm going to hit you with one that's kind of an untouched subject amongst Michigan fans. And a lot of people might not like it. He's one of the most beloved guys on the team. But how good of a season is Mazi Smith really having on the defensive line? And I know we chalk it up to a lot of like double teams and stuff like that, but the guy doesn't get a lot of production. You know what I mean? He ranks in the bottom 150 of his positioning in solo tackles, in sacks. He's constantly missing his opportunity to get to the quarterback when he does get one. So I'm not trying to stir the pot or anything, but with young guys like Mason Graham, Kenneth Grant on the interior that are just fucking animals, you know what I mean? Just like at getting to the quarterback. I'm just curious how good of a season Mazi Smith, our beloved captain, is really having. I mean, he's poised to finish the season pretty much the same as he did last year, if you look at the stat comparison.
I'm going to hit you with a big, fat pump the brakes. Because, I mean, it's blasphemy to even ask that question. Mazi Smith, let me tell you. So Chris Jenkins and Mazi Smith are the two guys that own the interior of that line. There are two interior starters that are responsible for stopping the run and getting interior pressure in the pass game. And let me ask you a question, Matt. When's the last time a running back got anywhere on the inside of that Michigan defense?
It's fair.
It just hasn't happened, right? And so sometimes when you're evaluating certain positions, the stat sheet doesn't tell the whole story. And so you could look at Mazi Smith's stats and say, well, he's not having a all-American season. He's not having even an all-conference season. But I would beg to differ. What Michigan is doing on the interior of that line is incredible. And Mazi Smith owns 50% of that, at least starting the game, right? Chris Jenkins and Mazi own that. So that's a pump the brakes for me. As much as I love Mason Graham and those other guys that are producing, I wouldn't touch a damn thing going on there. And Mazi has my full support. And I'm going to DM him after the show and tell him that you asked that question, just so you have the number one freak in the country coming after you.
I would honestly hope nonetheless, because and of course, all love to all these Michigan team members. You know what I mean? We have nothing but respect for them. It's just topics that people float around that catch my attention, that I like to float out there. So interesting to evaluate, but obviously still a great interior presence in stopping the run. Not an interior defensive line that pops on the stat sheet, but still great.
All right, moving on to my next pump the brakes take. I'm going to say that Michigan will have their best passing game of the season against Ohio State this year.
I'm going to hit you with a pump the brakes on that one, sir. I mean, it's just kind of something I feel like that we've been clamoring for the entirety of the whole season. I think, and don't get me wrong, because we're of the same mindset that we're going to smoke those guys down south. But I think we're going to get it done in traditional Michigan fashion, grinding it out in the trenches. We're going to win it on the line. And I just, I don't see it. You know, there's still a lot of hiccups to work out with the offense, with the connections and stuff like that. I'm not saying that it's impossible or improbable that we could come up with a big passing game, because we've kind of done it in the past. I just don't see it against that team in that environment. But just a side note, I mean, Ohio State, obviously prayers to all of their guys, but I mean, they're looking kind of banged up, a little bit dinged up right now. So obviously nobody wants a matchup where anyone's kind of inhibited. But I was watching Mayan Williams went down, parted off the field yesterday. Prayers to him. A great athlete for that team. But I mean, what are your thoughts about that really quick on the matchup against Ohio State?
Well, yeah, and the two-part answer for me. So first, addressing the passing game situation. I'm a big fan of evaluating teams the same way I evaluate people. And what I mean by that is once somebody shows you who they are, they're probably going to keep showing up that way. And so logically, I would think, Michigan's just going to run the ball against Ohio State. They're not going to have a lot of great passes. But what we see occasionally are these outliers. And I'm kind of referencing Michigan State in 2021, right? We like identified something. We were exploiting a little bit of a matchup. Andrell got the ball a lot. And if you look at Cade McNamara's passing stats through last year, that game just sticks out. It's like, oh, wow, there's this like big passing game right in the middle of the season. Well, I kind of think that it's going to happen again this year, and we're getting late, right? We got two regular season games left. And so what I'm basically saying there is I'm just hanging on by a thread, hoping that Ohio State is that game. Now we lost that Michigan State game, so I don't, I'm not trying to compare them in that way, but just from a passing game standpoint, I think we're going to get some things going because they've shown some vulnerabilities. Now to answer the second part of the comment you made, there's a lot of different types of shows and media and personalities out there, and people, approach rivalries a lot of different ways. I want to beat the shit out of Ohio State in every way possible, but I don't want college athletes to get hurt ever. I don't care who they play for, even if they play for Ohio State. And so to see a guy like that that's having an incredible season go down, you just feel for him. You want him to be okay. I would just as happily go up against a full strength Ohio State team and beat them. That. So as far as the injuries go, we hope they get better. But we'll play whoever they put on the field, we'll play. And also that's just part of the game too, right? And so with that being said, I don't want anybody to be hurt, but think about all the guys Michigan has hurt right now. Like every team is going to be banged up. We got to go out and play with the people that are on the field. And so I'll take whatever we get on that side of the ball and we'll go out there and play.
Absolutely. And the same can go for Michigan. I mean, several guys obviously dinged up for them last night as well. But that I honestly was curious about that as well. I mean, do you think that we're just kind of saving some of these guys, or I mean, hopefully nothing is serious, obviously, but Michigan always very hush hush, not wanting to discuss that, rightfully so. It's their business, but hopefully nothing serious for those guys either.
It feels like we are being especially cautious and sitting guys that could potentially play. We saw Roman Wilson and Jamon Green get back on the field this game, which was encouraging. And then you got guys like Luke Schoonmaker that he's dealing with kind of a rotator cuff thing, or at least that's what it appears to be. And those can kind of linger, but sometimes you can play with them. It depends on kind of the angle that, that shoulder's hurting and everything. So I think what we're going to see is we're going to throw everything at Ohio State. I think we're purposely keeping guys healthy for that. Honestly, I don't think you can hold guys out of that game, right? Like can you imagine going to one of these guys that has like a sprained ankle and saying like, yeah, you can't play in Ohio State? I don't think so. Like these guys are waiting all year to get in that game, and unless they're in concussion protocol or have like a broken leg, they're playing in that game.
And shout out to Mike Morris last night. I mean, you saw how quickly that guy, I mean, it probably wasn't the right decision to just go jumping up like that, but that guy just bleeds maize and blue. And you could tell in that moment he wanted really nothing more to just show all of Michigan Stadium and all of the fans like, hey, like, I'm gonna be all right. I'm not sure if he is like all right or what the extent is of his injury or anything like that, but that is a guy that deserves to play the rest of this season, and hopefully all prayers to him that it's nothing serious.
Yeah, we might not see him against Illinois. I'm just throwing that out there. We might not, because in very true form of the pattern that I just referenced. When guys have been banged up, they've sat out a week, right? And with Ohio State right around the corner, I'm not saying we can easily beat Illinois either, but we've got a lot of players. It's kind of a next man up mentality, and so if he's able to play, I think he'll play. But I'm just predicting right now that we might not see him against Illinois. Anyway, I think we're still in pump the brakes. You haven't done 2 yet, have you?
I mean, the last one that I asked was kind of, I guess, a hybrid of if you think that Michigan is. It was really a question more that I just wanted to ask, but I think we can move on to the next segment.
Sweet. Let's take a look around the conference, man. So there were some teams that helped us a little bit in the Big Ten, because at this point in the season, you're looking at resume, right? And so you look at our teams helping or hurting. Purdue went out and fucked us up real good, because we had a top 25 matchup with Illinois sitting on the books, which would have looked really nice heading into Columbus. And Purdue beat Illinois 31-24 in a pretty competitive game. And then I don't know, any comments on that one before we move on?
I mean, you could see it coming from a mile away. Purdue, the giant killer. I thought it was miraculous that they even that Illinois even remained in the top 25 following their loss the week prior, just because it wasn't a pretty loss to Michigan State. You know what I mean? And the committee hasn't shown a great propensity to rank Big Ten teams, so I wasn't expecting them to survive that loss. So this loss completely screwed it up. I mean, Illinois will still look good because they're an above 500 team. Looks better than some of our non-con opponents, but you really wish they would have been able to pull that out for us next week.
Yeah, well, that number next to the name makes all the difference. It shouldn't, right? Because a team that's, the 30th best team in the country, that should be taken into consideration, but it's really not. They look at ranked versus unranked, which is why some of this SEC bias comes into play when you got a bunch of ranked SEC teams. But so Illinois didn't help us. The team that we needed to help us the most did, and that's Penn State. They beat Maryland 30-0. There's a chance they could sneak their way back into the top 10. Maybe not this week, but by the end of the regular season. And so if we're sitting there with, and we've talked about this on the pod before, if we're sitting there with the top 10 win against Penn State, that might be the recipe for 2 Big Ten teams in the playoff, right? Penn State probably holds the key to that. If we see a really competitive Michigan-Ohio State game and one team doesn't get blown out, Penn State might be the key to Michigan and Ohio State getting in, as well as, of course, you're going to need some Pac-12 teams and TCU and some other things to shake down. So Penn State helped us out quite a bit.
Absolutely, and I think to add on to your point that a Penn State team that continues to not lose will greatly help that scenario. I've been kind of starting to put my foot in my mouth a little bit over the last 24 hours about the non-2 Big Ten teams getting into the playoff, just because these competitors keep falling off. Oregon lost last night. They're going to be out of it. The committee is going to be clamoring to try to throw USC in there. And, the committee is going to throw everything they can at trying to not let that happen with 2 Big Ten teams. But it is starting to seem more and more likely that as these teams fall off. It looks like Tennessee will probably get in, I think, if they manage to blow out their next two games in convincing fashion. They don't have a great remaining strength of schedule, and they're probably not going to play for an SEC championship. So it's all just going to rely on the committee's usual SEC bias of ranking two teams, and if TCU and USC can manage to lose a game in the next couple weeks, I think.
Yeah, there could be madness, right? I think we always forget that the last 2 weeks of the season, along with the championship games, there's a lot that can happen. Like, it feels like the writing's on the wall. We start to play things forward and we're like, the teams kind of are where they are. There could be a lot of movement. There isn't every year, but sometimes there is. And so we'll see about that. Elsewhere in the conference, Ohio State dominated Indiana. No surprise there. Michigan State pulled off a win against Rutgers. That's kind of irrelevant. We played both of them. We beat both of them. They're both really bottom half of the conference teams. Iowa beat Wisconsin, and now all of a sudden Iowa is looking a little bit more like a quality win. I'm not sure if the national landscape will even give us credit for that because they have such an atrocious offense. But Iowa's putting together a reasonably good resume, which if they win out from here, they could potentially look like a quality win. And then Minnesota blew out Northwestern, which is kind of irrelevant to us.
Yeah, absolutely. And Michigan's schedule keeps getting stronger a little bit, or at least balancing out. Maryland doesn't have the good resume that it did a couple weeks ago, but I mean, you also have these other teams like Iowa that are kind of making a name for themselves, albeit we don't really know how much weight a Big Ten West champion holds these days, right? But certainly Michigan's schedule looking a lot better than it did earlier on in the year.
Did you see who became bowl eligible? UConn is now bowl eligible. They just beat 8-1 Liberty
Look at that.
to get their 6th win of the season. So now all of a sudden, this incredibly easy non-conference schedule that Michigan played, that everybody's been giving them hell about. One of those teams sitting there is a bowl team already, right? Could win 7 or 8 games this year. So, I hope that the committee takes those things into consideration, because where a team's ranked when you play them is especially early in the year, is really less important than how that team ends up looking throughout the whole year. And I knew that UConn team was, with Jim Mora coaching them, was a good team, and now they've proved it. They're a bowl team, so that helps the resume. Around the country, Oregon falls to Washington, as you referenced. I think Michigan fans cheered at that one. That was nice. Bama could have and maybe should have lost to Ole Miss, but they pull out another win. I was all ready to say, I'm such a bitter guy when it comes to SEC. I was like, Ole Miss is going to beat Bama, and then why don't you just put them in the top 5, right? It seems to be the pattern, right? Somebody beats Bama, just throw them in the top 5. But I didn't have to get all bitter because Bama won that game. And I was actually looking at who I wanted to win that game based on Michigan, and I didn't really know, because like Bama losing is always good. But then again, Ole Miss is they were another one-loss team that was just sitting there. And so it's kind of nice to get them their second loss, because I think this year especially, I don't think a 2-loss Bama jumps a 1-loss loser of the Michigan-Ohio State game. I don't think we have to worry about that. So that happened. LSU looked unremarkable against Arkansas. That's another one of those 2-loss teams. They didn't look great. They went up against Arkansas's backup QB, and then TCU they won in a way that they haven't won yet this season. It was a hard-fought, low-scoring, defensive power football game, and the scoreboard of 17-10 over Texas doesn't look incredibly impressive, but I don't know if you watched any of that game. I did, and it actually was impressive. They were moving some bodies around and playing some really good defense.
They did. It was almost kind of reminiscent of a Michigan game in some ways, a little bit. I mean, at least in the first half, somewhat. It was very gritty and grinded out style of play. Points hard to come by. But yeah, kudos to them for getting it done in that Texas environment. I predicted that last week, or I don't know if I predicted it, but I pumped the brakes on you or something about it last week. But they got it done, and I mean, I don't really love it now, given the situation of them threatening us in the playoff. But they're getting the job done, and they're doing what they need to do. So, if anything, hopefully they manage to keep a second SEC team out of the playoff.
I'm still hoping that they lose to it'll probably be Kansas State in the Big 12 championship. I'm still hoping somebody will come into the Big 12. And Baylor's not a pushover either. Even though I think TCU will easily handle Baylor, there's a possibility they drop that one. So, you mentioned the similarity to Michigan games, and all day, Michigan fans have been talking about the irritation of the downfield passing game with J.J. McCarthy. And then I watched Quinn Ewers at Texas, and I mean, he couldn't. It was the second quarter. He still didn't have a completion, and they were trying to get him one. Then he finally got a completion, and it was to the other team. And I was like, you know what? I'll take JJ. He's playing a hell of a lot better than that. And it just goes to show you that these 5-star guys, they can struggle at this level. And sometimes the chemistry between receivers and quarterbacks just isn't there for a game, and for some teams for a whole season. So I was grateful to have JJ when I was watching that game.
Absolutely. Make no mistake, JJ McCarthy, we are grateful to have you here in Ann Arbor.
100%. JJ is the guy. Looking ahead to Illinois, we've got Illinois next week. How are you feeling about that game? It's a little bit, I wouldn't call it a trap game, but it's one of those games that if we beat the hell out of them, I don't think we're going to get the credit we deserve. And if it's closer than expected, I think we're going to get a lot of criticism, even though Illinois has proven to be a really good team. So I don't know. What are you thinking about heading into that Illinois game?
Yeah, I mean, checks notes, Chase Brown. That's basically all, like, really the only real threat I think that they offer. Their quarterback, I believe, is serviceable too. And then they're a feisty team. They'll give Michigan, I think, a similar challenge to the likes of like Rutgers and Maryland, possibly. It'll probably definitely be a game that Michigan has to win in the second half. Don't expect a rollover Nebraska win that we experienced yesterday, because granted, Nebraska was missing several key pieces, including their play caller. So don't take too much stock into this momentum. Don't slouch on Illinois, are my thoughts, because they can make you pay, and we could end up in a stressful situation just like we did against those teams that I mentioned, Rutgers, Maryland, people that gave us problems.
Yeah, and I think I'm glad that we're playing a team that is a little bit better heading into Ohio State. I don't want to have to grind it out too hard, but Brett Bielema team, they're going to be hitting hard. They're going to be playing some defense. The running back's going to be running the ball. Chase Brown, as you referenced, is going to be running hard. I think it just gets the team ready. I'm glad it's not Indiana or Northwestern, because I feel like that there's such a juxtaposition between that and then going to Columbus against Ohio State, that it just feels like that's a good kind of warm up game, and it could very easily turn into a battle that's hard to win. So I'm hoping we blow them out, but I'll take any kind of W in that game.
Amen, brother.
Looking ahead to basketball, we've got ourselves a nice little basketball team. We're ranked 22nd in the nation, and we already got a really entertaining competitive game. Did you watch the Eastern Michigan game with Imani Bates?
I did, it was very interesting. They hung in there, obviously, partially, I mean, majority, and due credit to Amani Bates's star power that he brought to the table. Excellent first start for him. But we did great. There were obviously some flaws in the game that you can mention. But I thought, for the most part, great team win early on in the season against a feisty opponent with a good star.
Yeah, they had some great names on that team. It was like Legend Jeter and like Noah Farrakhan and Imani Bates, and I was mad at all of them for the whole game because those, like, that little Farrakhan guy was, if there was one real concern Michigan has there, it's we were letting him dribble drive to the rack every time, and so that's my defensive concern. The offensive concern really is the point guard play. We saw Doug McDaniel turn the ball over. Jalen Llewellyn looks like he's still getting warmed up, but overall, I kind of tweeted out. Everybody's panicking, saying we're just not very good this year, and I tweeted out that I remember in 2017 we had a very similar game against VCU that we just barely pulled out. And I remember thinking to myself, Michigan basketball is just not very good this year. And sure enough, that was the year that we played in the national championship game, right? And so it's just a reminder to everybody, like, we're still finding our groove. We'll find out a little bit more against Pitt coming up this Wednesday, and then we've got some really big games on the schedule. So it's a little hard to get into basketball mode with football still going, and so I think we'll wait to really take deep dives into the basketball team, but it is fun to have, Michigan basketball on Friday and then Michigan football on Saturday. It's exciting when we have this little overlap in November.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. And I mean, shout out to Hunter Dickinson. That dude is like an NBA player ready that is just on Michigan's basketball team, So I think we're going to have a great season this year, and we're going to have some great moments, and they're going to wreak some havoc. So we'll see what's in store for the basketball team.
Yeah, with Hunter Dickinson, he scored 31 in that game, was a big reason we won the game. And shout out to T-Will. Terrence Williams was kind of my player of the game. He does a lot of the dirty work and made his free throws and was controlling possessions, and that was good. But yeah, Dickinson, I think the ceiling for him this year, it genuinely is a National Player of the Year, right? Like, not even just first team All-American. He has a ceiling of Player of the Year. And anytime you got a guy like that, you can win a lot of basketball games. So looking forward to watching those. And then I want to wrap up the show today. I want to tell you a story. I've referenced this a few times to you offline, and I've wanted to tell you this for a couple weeks because it's just it's kind of cool. It's a personal story about something that I did a couple weeks ago. So anybody that follows me closely might know that my dad is the reason I'm a really big Michigan fan. I grew up, like a lot of us do, right? Football it's really about family, and we grow up rooting for the teams that our dads or our parents rooted for, the schools they attended. And my dad raised me to be a hardcore, fanatical Michigan fan. I've always hated Ohio State and Michigan State. And I remember so fondly, the years of Charles Woodson and all the way through Braylon Edwards and Mike Hart. And my dad and I shared that together, and that was our bond. And last year, my dad passed away, unfortunately, and it was, and not to be a downer at the end of the show, like it was a really nice way that he went, and he lived a nice full life, and we're all really happy at the way that it happened, and so it's not a tragedy or anything like that. It just it is what it is, and so he passed away, and last season's run. It was kind of cool because I felt like my dad was a part of it, right? Because he was like looking down on us, and we had this run, and it was special, and we beat Ohio State, and won the Big Ten for the first time in years, and it was amazing, And we had my dad cremated, and so I've had his ashes all this time. And I attended the Michigan State game and brought the ashes with me. And before the game, my wife and I and my daughter, right, another one of these full circle moments, because my daughter's less than a year old, and my dad never met her, but knew that we were pregnant with her. And so now I got my daughter and my wife, and we go up to the newly named Lloyd Carr Tunnel. And it's where my dad and I used to watch Lloyd. We literally used to go to the games before the game, and we would watch Lloyd Carr and the team come in that tunnel. That was our routine. That was our tradition. So we went up to the tunnel, and the lady that was up there was nice enough to let us really walk like right up into the entrance, and we got to check out the Lloyd Carr Tunnel when I had my dad's ashes with us. And then right after that, we found this nice little group of trees, and anybody that's familiar with the Big House might know there's a nice little group of trees right next to the tunnel. And we went over there and we spread my dad's ashes at the Big House. And me being the extreme person that I am, I saved a little bit, and I kept them in my pocket during that Michigan State game. And after the game, I went down to the field and put my dad on the corner of the end zone at the Big House. And so, definitely not legal. I'm sure I was breaking some kind of law, right? We were like kind of ducking security and everything. But now forever for me, my dad is kind of in the corner, and I know where his spot is, and he kind of like lives at the Big House forever. So it's just a really cool situation for me to be able to do that, and to be able to honor my dad in that way.
Absolutely, buddy. Just an excellent story. Thank you so much for sharing that with me and all the listeners. I'm sure your dad would be pumped to know that he's forever down there on that field, so awesome. And
I tell you what, if it won't be this year because we're in Columbus, but next year when we're playing Ohio State and we're in the Big House, if a player like oddly, mysteriously like fumbles the ball going into that corner of the end zone, I'm going to share that with y'all. I'm going to be like, that was definitely my fucking dad, because he was a shit-talking, Buckeye-hating kind of guy.
A little forced fumble on your dad's stat sheet.
Yeah, it'll happen. I won't put it past him. But anyway, thanks for letting me share that, and thank you again for a great week of the Big House Bleachers podcast. I'm Michael Smeltzer. You can follow me on Twitter at Wolverine Chron. That's short for Wolverine Chronicle. You can also get at me at wolverinechronicle.com. And Matt, what about you?
They can find me on Twitter at Maze Crusader, or on my website at mazecrusader.com.
And that does it for this week. We will be taking on Illinois, trying to go 11-0, and we'll be back next week to talk about that. As always, go blue.